is everybody? Hi, Thomas.
Hi, Jason. Hi, Timony. I hope you're keeping well.
Yeah, hello to everybody in the comment section. All of our friends are here. Makes me so happy. What's new? How is the weather situation over there? You guys had that big storm last week.
Yeah, we it's got very cold. It's freezing fog where I am at the moment, so the temperature plummeted into proper winter temperatures. But we didn't get any. The storm, wasn't as bad as not here anyway, as what was expected. So that was a good thing.
Oh, Heather's here. Hi, Heather. Remember when it used to be like the most boring thing ever to ask somebody how's the weather? Now it's like one of the most dynamic topics ever. We were just having a huge windstorm here. What was that, Monday? No. Friday. Today is Monday. 100-mile-an-hour gusts. And then my friends over in Kentucky, I'm really glad that all of them are okay, but they were just completely devastated over there with that tornado that was like the longest running tornado in U.S. history.
Wow. That's amazing. That's really quite frightening.
Yeah, it was. The news footage just looked like footage from a movie scene, like one of those disaster, those big production disaster movies. It looked just like that.
I know. It's just that so many people died. It's so sad.
Yeah. Well, anyways. Alrighty. Well, you guys ready to start?
Yeah.
Alrighty. Did you have anything you wanted to say?
Oh, no, I was just going to say the weather stuff, Thomas, what you were talking about there is going to just segue nicely into this first story here. And I'm sure it's been something that's been on everyone's minds because it's like everyone, whether it's people here in the tribe that I know or friends I know from around the world, everybody's just having weird weather right now, including the kitty.
Yeah. By the way, we have a new mascot. This is little Jack, Christmas present for my kid. He's a cutie. So you'll hear him running around. Okay. Scientists say they caught China successfully changing the weather. China has succeeded in literally changing the weather, a new study claims. As the South China Morning Post reports, researchers say that during the Chinese Communist Party's centennial celebration over the summer, weather authorities successfully modified the weather above Beijing to clear the sky and reduce pollution for the tens of thousands gathered for a commemorative ceremony in Tiananmen Square. They did so using cloud seeding technology, a long-studied but controversial process that involves shooting silver iodide particles into the clouds with the idea of attracting water droplets to modify the weather. The paper by researchers at China's Tsinghua University comes a year after reports that China was dramatically expanding its weather modification program to a test area of a whopping 5.5 million square miles by the year 2025. That's bigger than the entire country of India and could end up raising serious issues with China's neighbors. Though this isn't the first time China has used cloud seeding technology, it's been dabbling since as early as the months leading up to the 2008 Beijing Olympics. This appears to be both one of the most successful and also largest scale tests conducted by not just the CP, but in the whole world. It was not publicized, in part. Oh, hold on. Sorry. Okay, here we go. My phone's been doing this jump around thing. It was also not publicized as part of the Tsinghua's researchers' paper focused on the evidence they found that cloud seeding had actually taken place, which included eyewitness reports of rockets being launched into the sky from the mountains outside of Beijing before the July 1st centennial, and accounts of rocket debris after the fact. According to the SCMP, there were a number of hurdles that weather officials had to jump to have successfully changed the weather. Pollution leading up to the CCP centennial was especially bad, the report noted, and it was China's wettest recorded summer as well. Nevertheless, reports indicated that Beijing's pollution on July 1st went from moderate to good, and the midday rain did in fact appear to be artificial. Though areas of the United States and other countries have tried to use cloud seeding technology to change the weather, professional China warriors have expressed concern that the CCP may use it for nefarious military ends, even though the US military has been trying to make it rain since at least 1967. This successful and large-scale operation in Beijing does, however, raise important questions both about potential military use of the tech. If one country is able to control its own weather, it could, in theory, do so elsewhere, which is unwelcome news for anyone who isn't invested in forever wars. Moreover, while cloud seeding is often touted as a potential solution for the mega droughts of the not so distant future, the technology hasn't been successful for long enough to measure how it affects natural weather patterns, never mind its impact on climate change. For now, though, let's just marvel at the fact that it now seems possible to literally make it rain on command. So our good old friends over there, the CCP, making it rain. How incredibly kind of them.
One of these worst kept secret stories. I mean, I love the way the article is trying to pretend that, like, you know, this never really went on before when everyone was doing it.
Right.
I remember back in the 80s, the Russia had 2 or 3 seasons where their grain harvest was atrocious, and the United States and Canada had booming grain harvests, and they were exporting huge amounts of cereal crops to Russia, first time in their history. And the Russians were maintaining that the USA had affected the Russian weather in a kind of a weather warfare thing. And, you know, this is where it's all going to go. I mean, not even that picture they show of the military. It is a funny kind of picture, the 2 guys shooting at the, like, fuck that cloud, you know?
Yeah. Fuck you, cloud.
It is a funny picture, but this is how they'll fight battles in this future. There'll be weather wars and climate wars. Yeah. And I wonder just why they're so obsessed with climate change is because they're weaponizing it like they're weaponizing the atom back in the 1930s. But
it's definitely our fault for using plastic grocery bags.
Yeah, well, they've always passed it on to us, don't they?
We actually had an article that came out of Denver last week. Colorado was kind of freaking out because they weren't getting any snow. And then a couple days later, if it was one of the main newspapers that comes out of Denver, the Denver Post or something like that. And they said, we seeded the clouds, we're going to have snow. And then they had a massive storm like 24 hours later. Yeah. So they're not even, I mean, it's just normal news.
I mean, that whole thing of Willem Reich and all that stuff is like, what went on there? You know, it's like, why did the FBI murder him and stuff? And why, these people say there's no such thing as conspiracies. I often point them in the direction of 2 things. David Yallop's book, In God's Name, which we're going to be making a film on BR313 about soon, on Roberta Calvi, and that's all factual. And the other one is why the hell were William Reich's books all removed from print and publication? And you simply can't get them because it's censored deliberately.
Yeah. And it's funny too, like with the conspiracy theory thing, it was only recently that like people started knowing that HAARP was actually a real thing. I remember it was even like around like up to 2013, 2014 timeframe. If you mentioned HAARP, that was just a crazy tinfoil hat, quote unquote conspiracy theory that, but now it's like, you can look it up, and University of Alaska Fairbanks, I think, bought it from the Air Force, and it's a real thing. So it's like, and that
one changed, Jason, to interrupt you. Back in the 1990s, Mother Jones magazine used to do a thing of the most censored projects in government, and they were covering HAARP back in the early 90s and mid 90s quite extensively. Now, this is when we see a takeover of the mainstream media, because if you were to go to Mother Jones now and say, what's HAARP, they'd say conspiracy theory.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny too. I don't know if you guys have noticed this also with the linguistics. People have been misusing the term conspiracy. When people mean to say conspiracy theory, they say conspiracy. So it's like people talk about, oh, that's just conspiracy. I'm like, no. Conspiracy theory is something entirely different. A conspiracy is, when more than one party gets together to conspire to do something, to join together to do something, usually covertly, right? So it's like when people say that, oh, that's just conspiracy. No, conspiracy theory. So it's interesting the way it's like social engineering can change people's opinion of something, not by changing the terms that people use, but by changing the definition of them. So it's like,
Today, we're told that in England, one person died. It said a person, Omicron, the first Omicron death. And when you read the article, it was a person who died with Omicron and not because of it. And the way they weaponize the language is just so interesting how it's done.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all social engineering right there. Just taking the terms and changing the definitions of words rather than having to switch things around like that. But just that whole idea too, like with education, like teaching kids to read by sight, not by sound, and all of these other things where they're ensuring that people can only have things defined by authority figures and not by not by going out and researching on your own. That idea that information can only be given to you through sight reading, meaning you can only know words that have already been defined for you, rather than learning phonics for kids where they learn to spell out a word and be able to read something new. With sight reading, unless they know that word, it's just a nothingness to them.
Yeah, a lady I know learned speed reading in school in the United States. The whole thing, when she was in the school that she was in, the whole thing was speed reading. Yeah. And I used to read books to her. I'd come home after reading a book on the bus or something, on a train, and I'd start saying, and I'm recalling and she said, "How do you remember all this?" And I said, "Because I read it." And she realized then that she'd only been taught in school to do character recognition,
right?
Not to actually read a paragraph, let it sink in, and think about it, and then move on to it. And she had to retrain herself to read. The damage was done by this speed reading craze in school of reading as fast as possible.
Yeah, and just that idea that way information can only be given to you from a certain place of authority. You can't go and find information on your own. So unless it's part of the approved vocabulary,
you're told not to research anything on your own.
Right. Yeah. So, well, yeah, this weather warfare thing is interesting. Like, the fact that the mainstream is starting to talk about this, and like Timothy was saying, there's an article about the cloud seeding in Denver. And I would imagine that something like this, with the Space Force and everything, there's got to be satellites up there doing similar too. But my whole point in going off on that was, did you guys see the story about, was it the jet stream stalled, or there was an anomaly or an aberration with it, right? Did you hear about that, Thomas?
No, but every so often it does do weird things, like drops down. Things. Yeah. I didn't hear the latest one.
Yeah, and it was synchronistic with that. Christian Morris made that video last week about that big storm that hit you guys, and then we were having those 100-mile-an-hour gusts over here in the Tri-Cities, and then what happened with the tornadoes, and it's just and then this thing about the CCP being able to manipulate weather, and it's like, I know people talk about like the butterfly effect kind of thing, where if you affect the climate in one area, it's probably got to affect somewhere, or you just got to wonder, yeah.
And it's also, we're playing around with dangerous things here. I mean, anyone who understands magic knows that human consciousness is directly connected to water, and the manipulation of clouds and cloud busting is one of the earliest things you do when you're learning magic, is to try and manipulate clouds because of the water vapor. Water holds consciousness, and they're messing with stuff that's very connected to human consciousness here. And again, it's like one more assault upon us, and these stupid commies in China are doing this, but it's been done in the United States as well. We know that. And I mean, what are the psychic and conscious repercussions of changing the weather? I want to know, because we all know that the weather is connected to our moods. That's why they paint, a cartoon image of a man having a bad day. There's a dark cloud over his head, raining. That's where that comes from. It's not a metaphor. You can actually create poor weather through if you manipulate a society into a certain negative aspect, the weather actually goes poor. And this has been shown that human consciousness directly affects water vapor and water content in the atmosphere. Now, and here they are messing with this stuff. Is this another way of trying to get into our brains and calling it weather modifications?
Yeah.
The Chinese love the reverse engineering, and the reverse engineering that process, the cloud busting process.
That's a really fucking good point, especially because the type of warfare that they're using here in World War IV is not a kinetic warfare yet. I shouldn't say it like that, but it's not a kinetic warfare at the moment, but it's a psychological and sociological warfare that's going on. The social engineering that's been here has probably been here for at least a century, I would say. So it's one of those long plays. But if this is being weaponized to affect our mentation and our psychology, yeah, that's a really good way of doing it, by changing the weather. And since it's not a shooting war by any means, but they're going through and trying to destroy the individual people by turning their governments against them. And now you can turn the environment against someone, that would just be,
I just remembered something else. Do you remember about 10 years ago, a city appearing in a waterfall in China?
Yeah.
It was an amazing footage. That footage is out there, and that's like not an uncommon phenomena of an unknown city to appear in water clouds, almost like a different reality. And this happened in China, and you could actually see the cars in the streets and everything driving in another reality or something. And they could not find out, they could not determine what city it was around the world. They didn't know. It was like a city that didn't exist. So, I mean, I often wonder if they were messing with stuff then, because they were so blasé about it. They were like, here it is. And China today, they reported down there, oh, look, another city floating in the sky, as if it was nothing.
Right. That's insane. But yeah, but you're talking about like, beginning magicians working with cloud busting, but it's like the CCP's idea of cloud busting is launching those fucking artillery shells at it, like in that photo. Fuck you, cloud. Yeah. But yeah.
Only bad things will come from it, I'm convinced.
Yeah.
Because if they lose control of the Earth's weather, they'll lose control of everything. Like what happens? I mean, Ireland and Britain are the same latitude as Moscow. We're way, way north. We're actually not lost to Lenin, St. Petersburg. We're Siberian levels. We're only kept from freezing by the Gulf Stream.
That's right. Yeah, that's where I was going with this. I was concerned if it is stalled, if the jet stream stalled, that's got to regulate your climate there too, right? Or
big time. The jet stream, the Gulf Stream is the one that's why.
Yeah.
For instance, in the west of Ireland and island communities, a part of their diet was coconuts. They would wash up from the Caribbean on the Gulf. Yeah.
Oh wow. Huh. Yeah, but I'm just thinking about that. If the United States, or the entire American continent, if they were to mess with the jet stream or the Gulf Stream, you could totally destroy the breadbasket here, or totally destroy the agricultural infrastructure here. And I know,
proliferations of birds go crazy, and then you have proliferation, like really bad insects, like mosquitoes and things like that.
Yep. But I mean, it goes along. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. It's just potential for all kinds of disasters.
Yeah. And I know Cliff High was talking recently about the idea that he doesn't think that there'll be a invasion or anything like that here on the American continent, because the CCP wants this continent as their own personal breadbasket. So that sounds like a viable theory too, that the CCP could be. I'm going to take these stories here from T, and because she's doing with something, but yeah, the idea that the CCP could be trying to take over this continent so that they have infrastructure to grow their food on and be able to go forward into their, to be able to feed all their people off of this land. So
yeah,
they thought. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll go on to our next story here then, unless you have something else you want to say about this one, Thomas.
No, I'm done there. I think we covered that well.
Cool. Oh, and then close that door so he doesn't get up. Okay. All right. So this next story is called Possessed Woman, 28, undergoes 9-hour exorcism to rid her of the quote-unquote devil after she attacked Italian priest during confession and started speaking Latin in 3 different voices. A possessed woman underwent a 9-hour exorcism after she attacked an Italian priest during a confession and started speaking in different voices and languages. The 28-year-old woman was accompanied by her family members of the Church of St. Mary of Mount Perico in Vicenza, Northern Italy. I'm not sure if I said that right, at around 11 a.m. on Sunday for confession. But witnesses said the unnamed woman began to speak and scream and swear inside the basilica, and she spoke in different voices and languages, including Latin. Corriere del Veneto reported. The woman ran through the confession rooms on the ground floor of the church, slapped her mother, attacked the priest running the confession, according to local news reports. 4 friars reportedly intervened and held a 9-hour-long exorcism for the woman, who they claimed was possessed by the devil. The exorcism did not finish until 8:30 p.m., where the woman collapsed and was taken home by her parents and younger brother, local media reported. Father Giuseppe Bernardi, the exorcist of Monte Berico, Father Carlo Rosato, and 2 other brothers were reported to have held the 9-hour-long exorcism. Some witnesses called the local police and ambulance services to alert them of the situation, but the authorities were said to have remained outside the church. Father Rosato said it was a real possession, and it was the only thing. It was and it was only in the evening that the situation resolved when the girl physically collapsed. The father claimed that there are hundreds of similar cases and said that they have 4 exorcists in the Curia Vincenza to deal with such situations. According to Il Gorano di Vincenza, her mother took her to confession because she believed there was a quote-unquote demonic influence behind her daughter's alleged violent behavior. Her father reportedly believed that she was suffering from a psychiatric disorder. So again, there's this idea, you've talked about this before, Thomas, that a lot of times what people diagnose as psychiatric disorders can sometimes be some sort of entity attachment. And I mean, I know that they use the vernacular of saying, the devil, but, when we're talking about Catholics and Abrahamics, that would be the vernacular that they would use for some sort of entity, whether, who knows what kind of entity it was, but it definitely sounds like some sort of entity attachment in this story.
Yeah, well, there's a few strange things in the story. I was always under the belief that correct me if I'm wrong, that they have the exorcism on the same day that she freaked out in confession, right? Now, I taught on the cardinal law that it had to get approval from the cardinal. I'm not the archbishop isn't even enough. It has to be the cardinal of the diocese in order to perform an exorcism. So it sounds like these priests took this thing on himself, and it also said the way he said there's been several exorcisms in the town in recent times. Very peculiar stuff that is. Yeah. And, so I mean, when you speak in Latin, the first thing I think is some kind of pagan thing, like going back to ancient Rome, right. A pagan deity or something like that, and they would call anything the devil. I mean, it could have been like anything like Pan or anything, or something like that. It could have been like an inspired spirit of somebody who was persecuted by the church in the past during the time of the iconoclast or something, or a pagan priest or something like that. But I tend to believe these stories. They're definitely true. I just find the thing it's very strange that they have the exorcism on the same day. They did not have the exorcism unless they got permission from the cardinal almost instantaneously. But I know that a Catholic church, from reading, what was that Irish priest who was always on coast to coast? I can't remember his name. Malachi McCourt. I remember from Malachi McCourt's radio broadcast, as well as what I know about canon law, that they're very strict on exorcisms. You basically have to have a signed letter from the cardinal. And the reason why they do this is because they're afraid of any kind of legal repercussions if something went wrong and the person who was being exorcised died or something. So that way the family couldn't sue the diocese. So this sounds to me a bit of a rogue priest here, unless something really bad is going down. The cardinal is saying, yes, go ahead, just exorcise her.
Right. It's not like calling the Ghostbusters or something. They got to go through a lot of different channels to get this kind of thing approved. Yeah. Yeah. Mike is asking, are exorcisms usually successful? That's what I wonder about too, because with exorcisms, it's like they're always using, the power of Christ or something. Right. And it just makes me wonder, with this kind of entity attachments, are there certain Abrahamic entities specifically?
Oh, well, it's more interesting because the idea of the exorcism is the rite of exorcism is to use a greater demon to scare out a lesser one. And in earlier times, the Catholic priests used to invoke Goetia demons and even angels to try and scare the thing out. And many people say that Jesus Christ is probably a super demon that scares the other one. That's how the theory works. The big demon scares the small demon out. Even the Protestants do it that way, and the Muslims do something similar with the jinn as well. Like a kind of a king jinn takes out and then you have Oberon, the king of the fairies, in the Presbyterian world. And that's real spooky stuff, though. That's another reason why the Catholic Church are like, no, the exorcism, I don't know about that, is because they know that the priest, you see that even in the movie, the Exorcist, where the priest actually takes Pazuzu into himself and then commits suicide at the end. Plot spoiler, I'm sorry. But So this story is really interesting. I'd be interested. I remember it was a few years ago, they were saying that exorcisms were off the scale everywhere. Catholics were in, Protestants, Jews, everybody were doing it. Muslims were and Hindus do exorcism as well. That there were exorcisms were left, right, and center. Now look at the world we live in now. Because I often wonder, when they take the demon out of the person, where does that fucker go?
Yeah, that's exactly what Kathy was saying, that the exorcism moves the entity, does not eliminate it. So, it's like what we were talking about in the symposium, the idea of like cathode and anode. It's like you're just discharging a charge, and it's got to probably go through the exorcist or what in the Goetia or in ceremonial, you call them the obsessive, right? The person that the entity is attached to. So it's got to go through them. But I would imagine it just goes to the next, just like electricity takes the path of least resistance, right? With the flow of energy. So finding something where
I went to school with a girl that had an exorcism done on her. And,
really?
And I didn't. She was when the exorcism happened, she'd left our school, but she was in a bad way. This girl, and she had a lot of problems, and she suffered from an extreme form of epilepsy as well. And apparently, when the exorcism was done, now she'd moved out. She'd moved out of the neighborhood that we lived in. I'd heard that she was cured of the epilepsy and everything, and had a whole new life. So I've always been kind of like open to the idea of exorcism because I know a story of someone that actually worked on.
And that's interesting too, what you said about epilepsy. Is I've known people with epilepsy who have strange precognitive ability where they can just see things that happen like a few years in the future. And it's just, I often wonder if sometimes with epilepsy, if they actually have some kind of attachment there, that the seizure moment itself kind of puts them into a reality that leaves their psychic firewall wide open, or the floodgates wide open for something to come through and attach. That where people who don't have some sort of neurological impediment, that they have a little bit more of a firewall, unless they're heavily under the influence of drugs or alcohol or something, where that psychic firewall's down. But I just wonder if sometimes those the physiological aspects of certain neurological disorders can make it easier for attachments to occur.
Yeah, probably. It's I'd be interested to see with this whole thing of the lockdown and all the Rona and everything going on, if we see an increase in things like exorcisms. These are stories we should keep an eye out for, and the tribe, if you see anything.
Yeah, one going along with what you were saying with epilepsy, as I've only in my lifetime met one person that had, and she was clinically diagnosed with it, multiple personality disorder. And yeah, it was a friend of mine back in high school. It was the mother's sister, and the sister had come to visit. And so the mom sat us down and was like, look, my sister has this thing. It's going to be very weird for you to witness, because she had 4. There was her regular self, there was a child, there was a man, and then there was a separate woman. And so she kind of had to like give us a little bit of a primer. And it was the strangest feeling being around her. And she was nice. All of her personalities were, none of them were violent or anything. But the little kid one was the weirdest one for me, because it was like a little kid, like a 3-year-old. And this woman was probably in her 40s. And she would just cycle through. In an hour, you could probably see all 4 of them. Wow. And it definitely felt, I didn't know as much about this stuff back then as I do now, but I remember just the feeling that I had, that it just didn't feel human. It felt very strange. Like I said, I never felt in danger or anything like that, but it was just one of the most uncomfortable things I've ever been around. Yeah. Yeah. It was weird. So there's definitely attachments going on in there.
Yeah, that's so interesting about multiple personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder. The thing that seems interesting about that is with the alters, where it's like a person can have parts of their psyche partitioned off, like you can partition off a hard drive, and those might be aspects of the personality itself. The public facing version of it might be something from a leftover trauma, but that identity itself can take on autonomy by itself. And that's when maybe an entity can attach to one of those alters, just like what can happen when somebody goes into like, when there's a traumatic incident that occurs to them, they're kind of stuck in that little bit of time, and that can turn into, a complex of some sort. And that complex itself can start to become, self-aware. And that's how like some of the, when they in like the modern Hermetic order, the Golden Dawn, they recommend people have a still go to some kind of like Jungian therapist or something, so that you don't develop some sort of personality disorder that becomes becomes autonomous and self-aware, so that some sort of entity can attach to it. Because I think that happens sometimes with a lot of kind of pseudo occultists who just go straight into like scrying the 38ers when they've, they just fucking read a witchcraft book the week before, and they think that they're a weekend warrior type, and they go and whatever. What's that? Chakras? Channelers, exactly. Yep. And there's some dissociated part of them, whether it's full on DID or there's just, everybody has dissociative moments in life. And sometimes those dissociative moments can cordon off a part of the psyche. And it just, again, like with the epilepsy, it's like you can, those moments there when the psychic firewall is down, something else can come in. Not necessarily all the time with anybody who has epilepsy or anybody who has DID or, borderline personality disorder, or any of those things. But I think it a lot of psychological disorders or psychological issues can be a big gateway for something else to come through.
Well, wasn't those partitions, that DID thing? That's where they got the idea from MK Ultra. U.S. troops had come back from World War II, and psychiatrists, the ones who've been in the worst battles, like Normandy or Monte Cassino or Iwo Jima, and they asked them, well, what was it like fighting at Iwo Jima? And he'd go, I don't remember. What was it like you were at the 1st Army Airborne at Normandy when you landed in Omaha Beach? What was it like? Don't remember. And these are not mentally fit young men. It's just that what they saw was so horrific to them that they partitioned it off in their brain, and the dissociative identity disorder shut it off. But then they discovered through hypnotism and things like that, they could bring it back. And that's where the whole idea of the Manchurian and the kind of like the action word came from. They pick up the phone one day and they say the red fox is chasing the blue rabbit. And that's what they wanted. That's probably what happened to Mark Chapman. Actually, I'm nearly bet money on it when he killed John Lennon. I think he was one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's because you can install like a post-hypnotic suggestion within someone, and it's like you don't even have to have them fully dissociated to do a post-hypnotic suggestion for somebody to activate, Manchurian Candidate style. But yeah, you can hypnotize someone, and then if the hypnotism is strong enough through, combat PTSD or PTSD that's severe enough, that partition's there and ready to program. Just like you can take an Apple computer here and partition off part of the hard drive and run a Windows machine on it. And the two machines don't necessarily talk back and forth to each other, but you essentially have two machines there. Just like with DID, you can have separate, entirely separate beingnesses there. That the one they might share the same memories. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And we don't fully know what is trauma. Is trauma an entity by itself? I knew a young guy here. He was Bosnian and he'd been in the Bosnian War, and the only way he could get to sleep at night was he'd been in a Serbian prison camp and everything. He escaped out, like half his family were killed. He ended up coming to Ireland. He didn't even have the pair of trousers on him and nothing, starting his life again over here. And the only way he could get to sleep at night, and I thought this was so weird, and I seen him do it, was that he would have a cassette player beside his head with like really intense speed metal music on it, and just slightly turned up a little bit, so he wouldn't think about what happened in the Yugoslavian Civil War. And it was the only way he could sleep, was to have enough noise in the background to not make him think about it. And it was almost like, I remember telling me this story and seeing him, and the impression I got was that he was being haunted by something, and not just a memory, but an actual thing, that wanted him to be constantly in post-traumatic stress over what he experienced in the war. And I mean, things he told me that like they used to throw them into buckets of ice water in winter and things like that. And they used to do all kinds of humiliation things to him. And he was covered in like shrapnel from grenades and stuff. And he was only like a very, very young guy. But the way he would talk about the trauma, and he was going to a hospital in Dublin to help deal with it, was the only way he could talk about the trauma it was another person. And it makes you wonder if there's an entity feeding on his trauma, feeding on his suffering. inside him. And then when he put the radio up when you go to sleep at night, that was almost drowning out the whispering of this thing in his ear saying, remember the war, remember the war, remember the war.
That's really interesting that you asked that question. Is trauma itself an entity? There's somebody who I'm not going to say who it was. I don't have anything to do with them anymore. But somebody that was in my personal life, grew up in very, very traumatic environment, a lot of violence and just a lot of really bad stuff. And this person told me a story one time that she was lying in bed. She was a night owl, would stay up late at night and read books because she couldn't sleep. And then one night, she was sober, wasn't doing anything, just reading a book. And she said all of a sudden the room filled with it looked like static. And then it coalesced into like a mass, and she was paralyzed. She became paralyzed in that moment. And whatever the thing was, how it formed, it entered her through her nose and her mouth. And from that day afterwards, that person was never the same ever again. That person was a very violent, vicious attacker, and I had to get rid of them. It's kind of a sad story, but it's fine now. It's been dealt with. But I have been attacked by those things. And that was really when I learned how to use my psychic firewall, because I was a little kid, so I had to learn this stuff on the fly. And I disassociation kind of, I don't know that I fully disassociated, but I disassociated from that person in those moments when the attack would come. And it was like a daily thing that would happen. So I learned at a very young age how to do that. And as an adult, I had to kind of go back and remember a lot of those memories, because I had missing time, because I just would block it out. That's how strong it had to be. I just had to block things out. So I learned the psychic firewall back then through those experiences. And you asking that question, is trauma itself an entity? I've never thought about it like that before. That's definitely something to ponder about. Because whatever that thing was, it manifested itself, and then it moved in.
Yeah, like a kind of a pain accumulator and harvester. Like, I mean, and then, a human being doesn't want to remember their trauma. So what makes us want to remember trauma? It's more just a survival mechanism, especially when the war is over or whatever, the abusive relationship is over. It's almost like something gets in there and says, remember, keep remembering. And I can remember having gone through a bad period about 11 years ago, and I used to, where I was there, I just wasn't in a good place mentally, emotionally. Well, not mentally, I was on the surface. Everyone thought I was not formal. Emotionally, I was in a very bad way. I found, but when I used to wake up in the morning, I'm not kidding you guys, this is the truth, and I wrote about it in Puzzling People, that I'd wake up and I'd be fully okay. Here we go, another day. And then I would remember what it was that hurt me. And I swear to God, it used to feel like an electric eel would start running up my spine from my bum, from my arse, all the way up my spine and the back of my head, and the blood pumping here. And it was almost like this thing was waiting for me to wake up so it could jump in there and harvest my trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. What you say there about harvesting the energy from the trauma, because that's so real. Because as we're talking about this dissociation thing, the whole principle behind dissociation is when you, the being, the soul, and the body become overwhelmed by a certain amount of pain, painful emotion, whether that's physical pain, emotional pain, loss or something. It's like in order to not deal with that, the person checks out, the consciousness shuts off right there. So in that dissociative state, you aren't there anymore, but your body's mind. So that the memory of your body itself is still recording everything that's there in that moment. So like if someone, has a motorcycle accident and their body, gets flung out in the street, they're knocked out like that, but the body's still recording, all the sonic information, the sirens, all the tactile information of being touched by all the people there on the road. So it's like later on, that person was checked out and has no personal memory, no picture memory of the incident, but their body still remembers the flashing, the wailing sirens, people going, "Oh my God, is he okay? His arm's fallen off." All that shit that was said during that moment of pain, and all that stuff gets stored up like a standing wave of energy. It's not like it's not normal perception that's recorded like our experience in life. Like right now, we're having this conversation here on Facebook, and this is stored away as a recall of experience. But when one dissociates, and you go your consciousness is rendered unconscious, but your body is always, your body's mind is always recording everything. It's like a perfect tape recorder that can record every experience. So it's like later on in life, those perceptions that are recorded and that trauma are still there. And that's the way those trigger things can happen, because a person doesn't consciously know they're being triggered by something. Like they don't realize that every time they hear, passing sirens and saying, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" Suddenly they go, "Oh, what the," they get all, they start feeling that pain again, because their body's like, "Oh God, let's not do this again, brother. We don't want to be experiencing this again." But the guy that had the motorcycle accident has no conscious recall of that yet. He was, rendered unconscious during that time. So that psychic energy there, I think that's like what you were talking about, Thomas, with the World War I stuff. Imagine doing that on a collective scale, not just for an individual, not just one platoon, not just one company, but not just a regiment, but like entire nations having gone to war, and all of that psychic trauma of World War I or a great war like that, all of that tremendous amount of psychic energy being used to charge some kind of, global ritual. So yeah, absolutely. I think there are people and entities out there that feed off of that psychic energy, that, intentionally implant people with post-hypnotic suggestions and everything so that they can feed off of it. Because, at the small scale here, our currency is money. But I think on the scale of like entities and, gods and demons and stuff, the currency is life force energy. The very stuff that we might feel it as love on the positive conscious level, but we feel it as pain and trauma on the unconscious level. And to them, it's, it's much easier to go about getting it through pain. It's always easier to destroy something than it is to create something, right?
I'm down with that. No, totally.
Yeah. So yeah, we're going to the next one.
Yeah. Okay. The mysterious 1561 Nuremberg event, the UFO battle. It was in April 1561 when all residents of Nuremberg, Germany, came out of their houses to investigate mysterious lights and loud sounds. They watched the sky in awe and fear as they witnessed what appeared to be some kind of air battle, and all of this in broad daylight of the early morning. The reports of the event say it lasted for about an hour, and artist Hans Glasser documented the strange event from the German Nuremberg Gazette. Describing the event, he refers to crosses, tubes, wheels, multicolored objects, and globes over the city. Hundreds of them. Objects would disappear in smoke, some even crashing into the ground. The smoke was visible for miles. This image and description have begged explanation for centuries. What on earth could explain these phenomena that were seemingly witnessed by so many people? Some would dismiss all of this to the appearance of meteors or comets, even other natural events, but the uniqueness of the Nuremberg incident eliminates such interpretations. The detailed description, which is given by Glasser, doesn't seem to fit with any natural occurring causes. The dreadful apparition filled the morning sky with cylindrical shapes from which emerged black, red, orange, and blue-white spheres that darted about. Between the spheres, there were crosses with the color of blood. This frightful spectacle was witnessed by numerous men and women. Afterwards, a black spear-like object appeared. The author of the Gazette warned that the God-fearing will by no means discard these signs, but will take it to heart as a warning of their merciful Father in heaven, will mend their lives and faithfully beg God that he avert his wrath, including the well-deserved punishment on us, so that we may temporarily here and perpetually there live as his children. Cylinders, crosses, and black spear-like object appearing in the sky are something that you would imagine seeing in a modern air battle, but not something that would take place half a millennium ago. A few years later, in 1566, another similar event took place in Basel, Switzerland, but this time it involved black orbs in a sky skirmish above the city. That event was also recorded at the time in the city's Gazette. Multiple reports, odd phenomena in the skies over major cities by a multitude of people have to be describing some particular event. Unfortunately, there were no cameras available back then to take photos or videos of the events. So the newspaper references and drawings are only evidence. These remain open to the interpretations of many and also to the various differing descriptions of the eyewitnesses. But nonetheless, something happened in the sky that day.
Yeah, I remember the story as a kid, reading in one of these, unsolved mysteries books, magazines, whatever. And I've always been Eric Von Daniken spoke about it. Carl Jung even mentioned it. And I think I actually have a theory. It's so funny you brought this up because I have a theory about this one. This is around the time the Ottomans were trying to invade Europe, the gates of Vienna and all this. And Carl Jung, in his book Flying Saucers, said that whenever we have great psychic trauma, we see them as objects and strange lights in the sky. And there was also a lot of magic going on around that time as well. This is, so I do believe the stories. I don't believe they're alien spaceships battling or anything like that. But they could have been even jinns or something like that from the Ottoman side. But I do believe that those stories are real and they did happen. But I don't believe that the whole thing of them being spacemen and alien space battles, that's, again, that infantile surface level thinking about this stuff. No, that's again, it could have been trauma. We're back to trauma again. This seems to be a recurring thing on the show. It could have been a result of collective trauma. It could have been plasma being released. It could have been lots of things. I know in Mexico in the late 1980s, there was an eclipse. And at the time, there was a lot of social problems in Mexico. And when the sun was blocked out, the sky was full of UFOs. And it was just the most incredible thing. There was a TV show at the time called Sightings that covered this thing. The sky above Mexico City was filled with these UFO orbs dancing and everything. And then we have the thing at Fatima in Portugal. And what really happened, we've got to make a film on that for BR313. But what really happened there was nothing like what was reported by the Catholic Church. It was very similar to the stories of what you hear in Switzerland and Nuremberg. But I do think it's trauma, opening portals, and generating something that can actually move in plasma.
Yeah, I mean, the trauma, opening portals, and UFOs. I mean, just like Hubbard and Parsons with the Babylon working in both of them back in '46. When you rip open the time-space continuum, it might not necessarily be nuts and bolts spaceships coming through there, but some sort of intelligence, like you're saying, jinns or whatever we want to call them, something else showing up, superimposing itself into this reality from another reality. Maybe similar to what people were seeing in the sky in China with those ghost cities, or those something else appearing from some other reality, not necessarily a parallel reality. I don't subscribe to that idea that there are an infinite amount of parallel universes out there. There's just that mechanically doesn't work. The idea that, like, for every action you take, there's a different universe created for that. If I had woken up this morning and had a different cereal for breakfast, that doesn't create another reality, for instance. But I think that there are parallel, or maybe not parallel, maybe more like in series and like a circuit, different reality structures, just like the aethers. If you think of it like an onion with the different peels out there, that there might be in the same point in space and time another reality that you have to tune in with like a radio receiver, essentially, to be able to tune into that reality structure. So sometimes when people are taking hallucinogenics or whatever it is, they're going through a tremendous amount of physical pain or something, they can tap into another reality because their neurology tunes them in to something that they can see that is always there, but there's nothing physical to knock up against, because our neurology is tuned into this reality system. Just like every radio station is out there on the airwaves right now, you just have to use a crystal and a dial set to be able to tune in for the receiver to pick up the right radio frequency and to play it through the speakers. So I think that when this trauma occurs, maybe there's something that happens collectively that can open up and blow things wide open to perceive something that might always be there. These cylinders and crosses and floaty shit might always be there all the time, and then some sort of collective trauma, some sort of big psychic amplification just made it possible to see them. The spiritual wildlife that exists out there, and maybe the next aether over from this one, or the next reality over.
Same thing too is that, I don't know if it's an anecdote or if it's supposed to be real, but that story of when Christopher Columbus came and the natives saw his ships off the coast, but they couldn't see them because they had never seen anything like that before. So there was no point of reference for them to see what they were seeing. So they just didn't see it until you see it.
This is like the Dazzle ship thing. The Dazzle ships, they were painted with mad colors, and some people couldn't see them. Other people could, but the idea was to make them very difficult for artillery to fire at them, because they couldn't figure out where they were exactly. because they're painted all these mad designs and colors. But some people reported not being able to see them at all, even when they were in front of them. And that's a weird thing. That illustration, that famous illustration that you put up there, that's got some weird stuff in it too as well. It looks like there's pikes or, pikes like in, army pikes broken and smashed. See them? And there's a kind of like a pike head there, a halberd at the bottom, the black thing. Mm-hmm. It looks like part of a pike. And around it are broken pike handles. You see that?
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't be fighting aliens with pikes. So I wonder what that's about. Like what would a broken pikes and in that image all about? That's very strange.
Yeah. And what it makes me think of immediately, that tying these stories together, the story that Timony was telling about the person she knew when the attachment of an entity came along, that kind of static thing, which is something I've seen this kind of static pixelated experience before twice in my life. Once when I was about 3 years old, when my family and I first moved to Ventura, California. I saw these kind of light pixel type of things that was like an overlay, and then I saw it again after doing the Bornless rite for when we were recording that for Liber Velocity. I did 5 or 10 takes of it to get it right, and worked up quite a charge. And then that evening I had really bad insomnia and couldn't sleep. And then in the room there was all these like flashing pixel type things that were there regardless if I had my eyes open or my eyes closed. And it was making these shapes in the room that were, they looked like they're in the room, but they were obviously being projected from my awareness, not in the actual room itself. So it makes me think about that idea that, if there is another reality system, one over from this one, that it kind of has like this pixelated look to it. And when people see those, those interlocking rings with the eyes on it, that's what I was seeing in my bedroom that night when we were making Liber Velocity. Was one of those the interweaving ring entity type things. So it's like I just wonder if that's what's being seen here too. It's got all those little orbs and spheres and crosses and stuff, and that's similar enough to what I've seen before with this kind of pixelated thing. And then what Timony was talking about with that person, seeing static before this thing occurring. That I think that might have something to do with the crossing over of reality systems.
Absolutely. That's a great story. That will always be with us forever. That does the Nuremberg and Baal's a UFO story from the back then. It'll always be an amazing story.
Yeah, I think we did a really good job kind of looking at that picture, almost like a tarot card. You look at that picture and what is it?
It has that kind of vibe to it, yeah.
Yeah, and the things that come up into your psyche when you're looking at something like that. There's a lot there. I mean, you could scry that picture and find out all kinds of things.
It has an alchemical art kind of vibe to it as well.
It does. All right, Thomas, are you ready to do the psychic weather?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The weekend psychic weather.
Good evening and welcome to this week's Psychic Weather with me, Thomas Sheridan. This week's Psychic Weather report warning is don't dance with madness. People I know who suffer from mental illness have been basically trying to contact me constantly. They've been coming to see me. They've been calling me. And these are not bad people or anything. They're people that are not well, but they all started off at the same time and came out of nowhere. And there are people I know that have had histories of mental illness, have been sectioned, have been, through no fault of their own, have been in hospitals and stuff like that. And other people I know that I don't particularly like have had these problems as well. I have this issue too as well at the moment. They've been accosted and acting very strange on the internet. So there's a thing, madness is on the warpath right now, but the people who are not well are trying to contact you. You must keep a safe space. You must protect yourself. They'll only drain your energy out. Even if they mean you no harm, they will. And I bet many of you have family members, friends, or people you know in your life who have suffered from bad mental conditions. I bet they've been contacting you, particularly last weekend. It was pretty bad. And this is the Psychic Weather Report in that don't engage. Be polite and build this distance between you and them until this passes over. So until for the next few days anyway, don't dance with madness. And that's the psychic weather report with me this week.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The week in psychic weather.
Great psychic weather report from Thomas. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, not dancing with madness is a great way to sum that whole thing up for sure. That there's so much.
I had a bit of a traumatic event this weekend. Someone trying to basically following me around, and it was not pleasant. And then I was getting messages and phone calls and people I know that have not been well over the years contacting me as well. So there's something, I'm sure people listening to this, you're probably having the same problem. Anyone you knew who wasn't well in the past, and through no fault of their own, I mean you no harm, but it's not healthy to be around these people when they're in this kind of manic state, because they can really, really make you feel down and really upset your own energy levels. Yeah,
and it's as if we're not dealing with enough of that already. Just trying to stay in good psychic shape. It's already difficult enough, and I feel like with what you were saying, they don't mean you any harm. They're not, for the most part. A lot of them aren't. But we're sort of like life rafts, So it makes sense when someone feels like they're going down, they reach for anything. And we're all very strong people, I think. I love and respect all of you guys, and it makes sense that they would be reaching out to us to just save their life.
Yeah, well, I mean, because of my previous work in the past, I do attract people that are not well, they're damaged over the years, and I've been kind and helpful and best I could with them, but they do have you do become a kind of I was becoming a kind of a safety blanket for them, and it was actually draining the living life out of me. That's why I put a big gap between myself and all that stuff, just to get away from it. It made me realize how many damaged people there are in the world. It's quite a lot.
Yeah, and it takes it takes time to be able to get to that point, because I think a lot of us are very emotional type people. It takes a lot to be able to get to that point where you can create those distances and those that safety, those walls, without feeling terrible about it. Which I people come to me like very much like with what you're saying, needing help or wanting advice. And for the most part, I keep it very, very simple, or I just don't engage at all, because I've tried so many times to do that. And I end up getting involved with shit that's nothing to do with me. And, even if it's just an emotional investment, I take that shit on. And so I've just gotten very comfortable with, I love you, but I can't do this for you.
I want to be guilty about things you've done yourself, not about other people's things.
Yep, exactly. I've had over this past maybe 3 or 4 months, I've had quite a few people reach out to me to help them with like some sort of like ghost or entity or something that they think is in their home. Or I've had people ask me how to do hexes, and I just stay the fuck away from all of that. Nope, sorry, that has nothing to do with me.
I had one woman who was clearly very unwell, who was convinced that there was something on her land. And she's been dealing with all kinds of new age whack jobs, trying to clear it out and stuff like this. And no matter what advice I gave her, she said, "You're my only hope, please help me." And I realized that she was probably the one that was infected herself, and she was actually trying to harvest my energy. Well, the thing was trying to harvest my energy through her. And a lot of that goes on. We know in recent times there's a branch of psychology and psychiatry that now believes that there's another personality inside a person who's schizophrenic. And right. You've got to be very careful around anyone who's had a history of schizophrenia, particularly if they're still doing things like taking cocaine or smoking lots of weed or drinking heavily. You've got to be really careful at the moment around people like that.
Yeah. Good advice. Definitely good advice. Did you have something you want to? Oh, okay. All right. So yes, moving along. Again, thank you so much for the psychic weather. That was great. Okay. Here we go. Elon Musk said Neurolink hopes to start implanting its brain chips in humans in 2022, later than he had anticipated. Elon Musk has said that Neurolink, his brain interface technology company, hopes to start implanting its microchips in humans next year. Neurolink, co-founded by Musk in 2016, is developing a chip that would be implanted in people's brains to simultaneously record and stimulate brain activity. It's intended to have medical applications, such as treating serious spinal cord injuries and neurological disorders. During a live streamed interview at the Wall Street Journal's CEO Council Summit on Monday, Musk was asked what Neurolink planned to do in 2022. Musk said, Neuralink's working well in monkeys, and we're actually doing just a lot of testing and confirming that it's very safe and reliable, and the Neurolink device can be removed safely. He added, we hope to have this in our first humans, which will be people that have severe spinal cord injuries like tetraplegics, quadriplegics, etc., next year, pending FDA approval. Musk said that Neuralink's standards for implanting the device are substantially higher than what the FDA requires. Musk reiterated the 2022 timeline in a tweet. Progress will accelerate when we have devices in humans. Hard to have nuanced conversations with monkeys next year, he said. Musk has previously offered earlier timeframes for Neuralink to implant its chips in humans for the first time. He said in February that Neuralink could start implanting the tech in people by the end of 2021. In 2019, Musk and Neuralink hope to begin human testing by the end of 2020. Musk has a history of overpromising and under-delivering on project timelines. In April, Neuralink released a video of a monkey playing a video game using a Neuralink device. After raising $205 million in July, Neuralink said it would channel the funds toward developing its chips so that it could allow quadriplegics to control digital devices with their minds. Quadriplegia or tetraplegia is the full or partial paralysis of the arms and legs. Neuralink isn't the only company developing brain interface technology. In July, a 20-person biotech firm called Synchron obtained approval from the FDA to start human testing. Well, there's a few things that just right back into what we were just talking about, neurological things, paralysis, and what will they actually be interfacing with?
He doesn't even look human in that picture. I sent you a file there, Jason, if you could pull it up. I don't even put it on the screen. There was an ad for Kinder Surprise eggs back in the early 90s in this part of the world. It was actually banned. It was so terrifying. There was this egg, a Humpty Dumpty character sitting on a wall going, squidgy, giddy, giddy. It was the creepiest ad ever. It was so disturbing that they actually banned it from TV. But he looks like that entity. In that picture, doesn't even look human. This guy is a really strange character. I don't understand why he gets so much. That's it. Yeah, the Kinder Surprise egg. There he is. Looks like him in that photo. That's what Elon looks like in that picture.
Yeah, this is wow. Yeah, that's definitely yeah, I'm just talking right now so the people who are tuning in so that my screen's showing. But yeah, that definitely kind of looks, he's got that same kind of smile that Elon Musk has. That's
face kind of empty.
So here's Elon Musk.
Squidgy, that's what you should say. Squidgy, artificial intelligence.
I don't want nothing to do with his surprise egg.
You have to go look online on YouTube for that ad, banned Kinder Surprise egg, and you watch it. It's absolutely creepy. But yeah, I mean, I don't understand this guy at all. I don't understand the appeal of him. I don't understand who he is, what he is, where he came from.
He's so fucking boring.
Yeah, he says nothing, and it's just like, there was always these kind of conspiracy theories that Albert Einstein wasn't actually a scientist. He stole all the patents from the patent office in Zurich, and he pretended by other people's work. And when people would have conversations with him about science, he would never talk about science. He would talk about things like baseball and Hollywood movies and pop music, and he just pop culture. He knew nothing about, and he'd never have conversations on science. And a lot of people said there was a conspiracy theory that he'd stolen all these theories from the patent office in Zurich. Alan Watt did some quite good stuff on it. I don't know if it's true or not, but the same kind of, he reminds me the same. If I sat down with him and had a conversation about the things that he claims to be doing, would he be able to have that conversation with me?
Yeah, one of the last times I traveled, the girl I ended up sitting next to on the airplane worked for SpaceLink. That's his SpaceX. Yeah, his satellite company. And no, it was SpaceX. She worked for SpaceX. And so we just, it was a couple hour flight. And so we had some really interesting conversations. And I asked her, have you ever seen Elon? Does he come to your offices? And she said, yes, he's there all the time. He's a very weird fucking guy. He never ever sleeps. If he sleeps, he'll go into one of the offices for maybe 5 or 10 minutes and just sleep, right? Quote unquote, sleep.
Power naps.
Yep. For 5 or 10 minutes and then come back out. She said he never stops, but he has zero personality. It's very strange. She said, yeah, being around him is weird. Sorry.
Yeah. Like Bill Gates, they say the same about him. And if these people develop cults around them, I knew people that used to work for Microsoft in Seattle. I'm sure, Jason, you've heard this story. And it was like people sitting around eating pizza in the halls, talking about what Bill said today in his email. You know, I can imagine that SpaceX is the same, what Elon said today.
Right. And just this idea that like his creative genius would be creating something that's being implanted into people's brains that like coming out of the zeitgeist of him, it's just got to be a fucking terrible invention, like something that's created by that personality. Yeah. He's probably, you know,
I feel the same way. I feel the same way about his implants that I feel about the needlecraft. If you're that fucking dumb, take more than one,
Yeah.
2 or 3. Keep on going. You probably deserve to be a fucking controlled. You're that,
Right.
you know, you're that much of a puppet, you know.
Yeah. And it's like with this again, too, like if they're putting in something into people's neurology, you know, neurologists and the top medical scientists still, you know, don't really even understand what it is to be human. They still think that to be human is just, you know, walking around being an autonomous pile of flesh, nerves, and, you know, hormones. They don't understand that.
That's why.
Yeah. They don't understand that there's more to emotion than just, you know, serotonin and, you know, and all the, you know, all the different, the different hormones. There's more to the human experience than just, you know, pumping out. Yeah. So it's like this idea. Yeah.
Dawkins talking about what it's like to be human. I'm like, that's not how I feel.
Right. Yeah. Like that thing Timony posted. I think she reshared it. That thing of when you tell a person to, in their mind, imagine an apple, and there's a scale from like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there's like some people, you can imagine it. You can feel the texture of it. You can feel the texture of what it'd be like in your mouth, a little piece of skin between your teeth, the apple skin and everything. And then there's people that just grayer and grayer and grayer until like number 5, there's nothing there. And then the comments on it are people like, yeah, I don't see anything. How could, if you see anything less than 5, you know, you're insane or something like that, you know, that, and it's just that thing.
Oh, that put the willies right up me. When that chap from Australia, sorry, I forgot his name, posted that to the Beyond Room 3. Yes, wow. And he said quite rightly, did they even know what a summer breeze feels like? Or I mean, I can not only see the apple in my head, but I can taste it in my mouth.
Yep.
I can feel the crunch of it. I can smell the ozone off it. You know, it's just been pulled off a tree. And they can't even imagine it.
Right.
No, this is what's happening. There's all these voids have all been born, all these NPCs. There's too many bodies in the world and not enough souls. And that this is where the likes of Elon Musk is setting in with the digital AI soul to fill these fuckers up with something else. Yep. And the attitude is if they're that dumb enough to take it and fuck it. Well, look, humanity's split in two. That's just the end of it. That's just the end of it.
I keep coming back to the interdimensional body snatchers idea that it's like the timing is perfect right now for some sort of invasion to occur where all the NPCs get taken over by some sort of extra dimensional intelligence. And if there's some sort of chip in there, that's just like the perfect link there. So, you know, if there's a software interface that has an operating system for the human neurology, then bam, right there. That's, if you want to call it like a Shoshona, you know, the link between an entity and the body, you know, they're creating this digital Shoshona to create some sort of link between the world that Elon Musk came out of, whatever strange reality he came out of, you know.
What Timony said, that like that's just so interesting. He has no personality or anything. And yet, you know, I mean, I thought you had to have a personality or charisma to be, you know, noticed, but he's clearly like almost someone else's project.
Yeah, if there are extraterrestrial or extra dimensional entities living in human bodies, you know, I would pick him and Darth Zuckerberg and
Zuckerberg, yeah, exactly, and Gates. So many of them now. Al Gore, lots of them. They're just, there's nothing in, and you see like where the thing is failing, like in Biden.
Yep.
No.
Yeah, it's like with him.
Boris Johnson.
Like,
started out normal and kind of normal and just an annoying aristocrat, and now he's completely like gone. It's like, what took him over? I mean, somebody posted this morning about I'd mentioned that's a spiritual battle, and someone had posted on the thread that they were watching some on UK TV. They were watching like literally the person trying to justify, putting the needlecraft in 5-year-olds, and she said you could actually see the entity fighting inside the thing. Yeah. Like that, the entity struggling to. When they mentioned that a micron was weak, it was not a strong problem. He said you could actually see the entity inside moving. I really do believe this now. I mean, I really do believe that these people they're on us. There's something else there now. And there's always the NPCs and the normies and the sheeple types who will just do whatever they're told. But then there's not only them. There's something else beyond them, and they're not human. I mean, I don't see human beings when I see Jacinta Ardern or any of those people on television. Or
and just like with any military invasion, you don't go full in. There's always scouts. There's always an advanced party that goes in covertly. There's always people that are deep undercover that go in before, to ensure that the beach is ready to land on, so to speak. And
I had a thing for a couple of years now. I've been working on it that I believe that Clive Barker's Cenobites from his Hellraiser novels have actually come into reality. They've been resolved into chaos forms, similar to the Lovecraftian ones have been resolved into chaos forms. And they're actually crossed over into humans. And if you look at so many people today, now look, I have loads of friends and I've had girlfriends and stuff full of piercings and stuff, but there's some that take it too far and they start looking like Cenobites. And there's a point where they have all these cool piercings and it goes on to something else, and something else kind of takes over. And what is this thing? But I do believe that these Cenobites are actually real now. And I do believe a lot of the stuff that, it's going to sound very controversial, but this transitioning stuff, a lot of it is sadomasochism to destroy sexual organs in order to feed a Cenobite.
Goddamn. Yeah. Yeah. I finally figured out why Mark Zuckerberg's haircut pisses me off so much. It's because they're making it's Caesar's haircut. In his mind, that's what he thinks.
It's also the haircut that a poor family does on their son with a bowl on their head to cut around.
It's god awful. It's god awful.
I mean, all the money and he has the worst haircut in the world.
Yeah. And he's got that thing too where he wears the same outfit every day. I remember they made an article about, so there's one less choice you have to make. It's like, what?
There's one photograph of him where he's walking through an audience of people and they're all got those AI goggles on their heads and they're all sitting like this. And it's the only picture I've ever seen of him where he's literally effervescent. He's like walking through like this. Like so
he's back in his home reality.
yeah, he's like so happy. These humans have been controlled and taken into my world. Like it was always like that. Delighted, like a serial killer getting a rush or something. I think Elon Musk and all these people are part of that, and all that crap. I don't think any of them are human. There's something else going on there, and I think that they're not intelligent. They're not. You don't see them. Have you ever seen them interviewed openly on a show? Any of them never do. Where when you see Bill Gates or Zuckerberg's like this all the time when he's interviewed. Did you ever see the thing where he interviewed the space pilots, the astronauts on the ISS? It's the most fucked up thing you go look at that sometime. Zuckerberg talking to the ISS astronauts, and then these are like kind of hard ass NASA guys, and they're looking at it. You can actually see them looking at each other, going, "What the fuck is this asshole?" Like when they're talking to Zuckerberg. And you see Gates when he's interviewed as well. It has to be heavily scripted and heavily narrated. And there's actually things of him being in a testimony where they show that he was actually deliberately putting bugs into Microsoft software, so you'd have to buy the new version, which Apple and Steve Jobs did the same thing as well. They all came in on court. Now he's doing the same thing with people. He's putting bugs in them, and so they'll have to be fixed. And these people they're not human. No human being. A human being doesn't think like that. That's just all there is to it. They don't think about like damaging people so you can fix them. And there, when he's talking about pandemics with his wife, and that's another thing too. They've all got this sort of like non-genderness about them. Have you noticed that? Like And as if it's, you know, you often wonder if the entity doesn't know if it's male or female that day. So,
Where the entity comes from a place where there's not male and female reproduction.
Trying to fix it somehow. I saw a picture of Jacinta Ardern where she clearly had a penis dangling under her skirt, and you could see her knob hitting you could see her knob. I thought it was a joke. She was wearing a dildo or something as a laugh. You could actually see her knob bouncing on the inside of the skirt. What the fuck was that about?
Yeah. Have you seen the face swap of Bill and Melinda Gates?
Yeah, scary.
Right. But I really do think, like, with what you're talking about, the transitioning thing, it is something like, you know, sexuality has become original sin again. And it's like this template's come back again, where human reproduction in the natural way is become evil. And they want to ensure that. Yeah.
I think the entities, are the same entities that when Christianity started.
Absolutely. That's where I was going. Yeah.
The stylites who were doing things like chopping their balls off and stuff like that. And that was castration was a huge part of the early Christian church until they realized there won't be any of us left if we keep doing this. and this kind of thing.
That's the whole point, right?
Yeah. So I think the same entities that took over the Roman Empire, 1800 years ago, are back, and it's the same entities.
Yeah, and just like you said, so there won't be any more. There won't be any more people. That's the whole point.
Iconoclast, the BLM statues being pulled down. That's the same as the iconoclast. It's destroying the statues of the Roman gods and throwing them in the Tiber. Yeah. And we saw that in England. They actually took a statue off of a guy in England and threw him into the river in Bristol, into Severn. It was exactly what happened 1800 years ago in Rome. It's the same mind virus. The same entities are back.
It's a template of like it's like a script that software runs on. It's like they run the, you know, whatever's installed into their psyche runs the same dramatization, like a script from a play. You know, it's like they play the same drama again, and it's just, you know, the same archetypes get brought up, just change the names, the dates, and the places, but it's the same gestures being done everywhere. You know, the same moves.
Yeah, and in the same way that 500 and the Renaissance came along 1,000 years after the Christian overthrow of the classical world, they started pulling these incredible statues out of the ground. Oh my God, this is such a realistic statue. This was done 2,000 years ago in Greece, that they've all been buried or hidden or thrown into the Tiber. And you will see the same today. They would pick up paintings that were done by Van Gogh that was, you know, was considered racist or something, or Led Zeppelin albums and things like that. And they say, oh my God, the old world, the old analog world was unbelievably amazing. In the same way, in the Renaissance, when they rediscovered the classical world, they went, oh my God, the classical world was incredible. The same parasites are back.
Right. And it's going to be all the youngest people now in a couple decades rediscovering the world that was there before all of this and going, oh my God, there's this beautiful world. There was this, you know, there was something outside of the VR goggles.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, isn't it? When you think about it, I was born analog, I'm going to die analog. And that's how I feel. We are if our tribe has any name, we are the analog tribe. We really are.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going back again to that whole, you know, owning nothing and being happy, but it goes even so much further than that. There was a story that was circulating a couple days ago about somebody inside some version of the metaverse that's available to like super rich people right now, because it's not available to everyone yet. Somebody paid, it was like $450 million for a fucking virtual house right next to Snoop Dogg's virtual house in this fake world. And so that's it. That's like, you know, they just want everybody sitting in basements, you know, hooked up to some sort of fucked up feeding tube thing, because your physical body doesn't do anything anymore. And you just, you know, it's like that old movie Videodrome. Do you remember that one from the 80s? Fucking disgusting, creepy, just fat fucks just sitting around not doing anything with goggles on.
Cognitive, the new flesh. And do you remember how the portal opened in that? Him and James Woods and Debbie Harry were doing S&M sex.
Yeah,
he was lighted cigarettes and stuff like that, and that's when the portal opened. And again, we're back to that.
Yeah, I remember, Thomas, right before the whole Rona thing went down, you made that first Cenobite video. That was back in like, is it February of 2020? The first time you talked about it? Yeah, and you were talking about that very thing of it. It starts with something small like that, and then it gets a little nastier, and then a little nastier. And it's just like, then suddenly like the dissociation thing occurs again, where it's like doing totally non-human things. And once you compromise your humanity right there, So
yeah, and did you see these American news broadcasters who like did these signing offs, like America's in danger kind of thing before they left their jobs and retired? I found that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Chris Williams, or whatever his name is.
Yeah, there's several of them. It was a very strange weekend with all of that, and I think there's just going to be more and more. Yeah,
CEOs all resigning and everything.
Yep. The Twitter dude and all that. Yep. Yeah, it's.
It reminds you of when Christianity took over, all the Roman governors all like retiring or being killed, or the pagan priests all stepping down or being hounded out of town. And they used, one of the main things they used is legal challenges to destroy the pagans. And they were constantly taking legal challenges against pagan temples, the Christians. And look at it now. Look what they do now. Like you have like cancel culture where you say the wrong thing and you can be sued or go to prison.
Yeah.
It's back. Whatever entity Christianity is back.
And I bet in the metaverse or whatever version of it that people will be using, there will be consequences for not being politically correct, where you'll have you'll have stuff taken away from you, or you'll go into virtual jail or something, and in your VR headset, you'll have to sit in your fucking solitary. Go sit in your tower somewhere.
When Klaus Schwab said, when they said in the World Economic Forum, you will own nothing and be happy, the first thing that I thought of with that was what you call it when you confiscate.
Yep.
And confiscating stuff. You will own nothing because we're going to take it. They're like the global bailiffs, the global repo men.
Yeah. And I bet there'll be government issued VR sets and computers to connect these two and something like that with everyone's universal basic income. But I think this transitions nicely into the next story that T's going to hit here.
This one will actually tie into your 100-year video as well. Let's see. Controversial assisted suicide pod cleared for use in Switzerland. Assisted suicide booths, a longtime fixture of sci-fi, may soon be a thing in Switzerland. Swiss outlets report that the manufacturer of a 3D printed assisted suicide pod called the Sarko capsule has received legal approval to be used by the public. Switzerland has few legal barriers to physician-assisted suicide, and it has become an accepted practice, with hundreds of people, most often those with a terminal illness, choosing to end their lives via the method each year. Several other European countries, including Belgium, Germany, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, have similar policies in place. While some of their neighbors accept other practices, such as passive euthanasia or withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment in certain circumstances. In physician-assisted suicide, a patient chooses to die with the help of a medical professional, which often means simply writing a prescription for a lethal drug. During euthanasia, a medical provider uses active means to painlessly end a patient's life. And passive euthanasia or withdrawal treatment both involve cessation of medical interventions that prolong the life of the patient. According to Swiss info inventor Dr. Philip Nitschke of Australia-based international nonprofit Exit International, says that the Sarko death capsule is activated from the inside by the person intending to die and can be towed anywhere, such as an idyllic outdoor setting or in the premises of an assisted suicide organization, for example. He added that the device is designed with comfort in mind. The capsule is sitting on a piece of equipment that will flood the interior with nitrogen, rapidly reducing the oxygen level to 1% from 21% in about 30 seconds. The person will feel a little disoriented and may feel slightly euphoric before they lose consciousness. Death takes place through hypoxia and hypocapnia, oxygen and carbon dioxide deprivation, respectively. There is no panic, no choking feeling. Nitschke added that the death usually follows unconsciousness in such a setting after around 5 to 10 minutes. In 2020, he told the site Exit International, asked for senior advice on the legality of using the device in Switzerland by the country's medical review board. And the organization recently learned there are no legal issues standing in the way of the device's rollout. The first and second prototypes are respectively on display in a museum and not aesthetically pleasing. So barring any unforeseen difficulties, the first operational unit won't be rolled out with the aid of a local organization in Switzerland until 2022. Some features, such as a camera necessary for communication and recording informed consent, still need to be implemented. Nitschke told Swiss Info that eventually Exit International plans to develop ways for the process to be carried out without the requirement that a doctor be present for psychiatric review. Our aim is to develop an artificial intelligence screening system to establish the person's mental capacity. Naturally, there is a lot of skepticism, especially on the part of psychiatrists. But our original conceptual idea is that the person would do an online test and receive a code to access the Sarco. Critics of the Sarco device says that it runs contradictory to medical ethics. Dr. Daniel Samalsi, a professor of biomedical ethics at Georgetown University, an opponent of assisted suicide, told Newsweek in 2017 that it's bad medicine, bad ethics, and bad public policy. It converts killing into a form of healing and doesn't acknowledge that we can now do more for symptoms through palliative than ever before. In Switzerland, according to The Guardian, the law only prohibits physician-assisted suicide when it's done with self-motives, meaning that it is typically done with the assistance of nonprofit organizations. In 2020, the Daily Beast wrote, some 1,300 assisted suicides were carried out in Switzerland. According to Business Insider, statistics show that from 2019 to 2020 in the Netherlands, euthanasia rates increased by 9% to 6,938 procedures. Regional Euthanasia Review Committee's chair, Jaron Ricourt, told Dutch paper Trouw such figures were part of a larger development. More and more generations see euthanasia as a solution for unbearable suffering, but the thought that euthanasia is an option is the case of hopeless suffering is very reassuring. Making me feel dirty just reading that. I feel unclean.
You ever see the movie Falling Down with
yes. Oh, that's been a long time.
Do you remember when this Nazi guy assumes that Michael Douglas is a Nazi too, and he takes him into the back room to show him all his Nazi memorabilia, and one of the things he has a can of Zyklon B gas from Auschwitz, and he says, could you only imagine how many, and he uses a derogatory term for Jewish people, this took out. Right, I look at that suicide machine, right, and I look. Can you only imagine many hipsters that's going to take out?
It's so cool, guys.
It plays Mumford and Sons as their dies as being killed, but that first, I mean, look, if somebody is in a very bad physical way, in terrible pain, and they're very sick, I have absolutely no problem at all with those people taking their lives. The problem is you'll have this kind of Scandinavian kind of mentality that like, oh, I'm bored, life is crap, I'm going to kill myself. And what you see, and the reason why I'm against that is not because I don't think these fuckers deserve to live, but it sets a precedence that life is cheap. That like, oh, I have a problem, fuck it, I'll just exit, exit international. And I even look at the thing, it looks like a high-speed train, it looks like the front of one of those high-speed trains or something.
Yeah.
It's again, if you're sick and suffering very terrible illnesses, then in terrible pain, I have no problem with that. If it's just for like you're bored, yeah, I agree with that. And so it's Logan's Run, isn't it? That's what that's going to be. All the hipsters are going to be going, having the last meal of like avocado toast and then getting into that thing, and that's what's going to happen. It. It'll be or in remember in Silent Green where what was his name? Charlton Heston's friend decided to die, and he gets into this suicide room as well. Yeah, I mean, that's what they're.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how the thing said about. Oh, sorry.
This is the entities. The entities again. They'll give us every way of killing ourselves, but they won't give us any reason to live.
Right. And you got to love how it said in the article that it's not that they have prototypes right now, but they're not aesthetically pleasing. It's like this thing that they got there's like that, somebody made that in a CAD software real quick, but this thing that probably actually looks fucking horrifying, the actual ones that they've got. And just this like
bottles of chemicals and everything on. Yeah.
Right. And just,
it looks like what the Nazis had, like probably looked like something like that.
Yeah. It looks probably like a death machine. And just imagining like, people getting issued one of those and having that in their VR set and they're just laying down and that thing with their VR set waiting to die. And like you said, giving people more reasons to die than more reasons than reason to live.
And then it becomes part of the current agenda where they say, well, you didn't pay enough taxes this year and it doesn't look like you're going to be able to pay off that loan. So, Exit International awaits you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know it's like the dream I had, I want to say it was like in 2017 or 2018 about like a another Holocaust thing occurring where they were doing, rather than burning people alive, they were liquefying them in some sort of they put it off.
Oh, that does exist. That does exist.
Oh, yeah.
That machine does exist where it liquefies dead bodies into fertilizer.
Right. And in my dream, it was like, they would be uploaded, their consciousness was going to be uploaded into some machine. And it was good for the environment in the end, because there was less of a carbon footprint. And, people were, there was like, the cult was wearing these like white and green, these white robes with this green trim on it. And there was like a ceremony going on where people were going into these cylinders and, just being liquefied alive. And there's like this happy bullshit music going on. And like, there's like this little thing of like consciousness uploading these little bars and like the smiley face of them like getting uploaded like that. And, but it's like, I think that's, imagine these things that there's one, just like a toilet in every house, there's a suicide pod in every house. Yeah. And then it's just,
the thing is, there's not, even right now as things stand, there's loads of ways people can be put to death. We do it with prison on death row all the time in America, an injection, right? They don't need that machine. That whole thing is designed as a business to try and and it's a business, and it's in the business of it. It's got to seek customers, and its whole thing will be kill yourself. You might as well kill yourself.
Yeah, and it'll be hooked up with the drain system. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought the people who kind of developed those kinds of machines give you the creeps anyway. I saw a very strange documentary. It was one of the funniest things ever. I saw this documentary about Dr. Kevorkian, and a suicide machine in America back about 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And he goes to this woman's house that wants to kill herself. And she's like this middle-aged, like kind of, if she was alive today, she'd be the type to have to, wear a mask, stay at home. And your man Kevorkian is setting up the suicide machine for her. And he says, you put your hands in here. And he grabs her hand. She goes, oh, you hurt me. The fucking machine was supposed to kill her. And yet she's complaining about being hurt. The machine that's going to kill her not being comfortable. I mean, this is what these people are like. I mean, I was watching this going, she's going to kill herself with this machine. And she did too in the end, with this suicide machine. But she complains that the thing is too uncomfortable while she's using it. It's like these people have no reality.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah, it gives me a real icky feeling. Like Timothy was saying, that's just like this one, just an awkward place to end things off. But I really do think that something like this is kind of the plan. Like you're saying, up there in the kind of Scandinavian countries, they have this idea of things. But here in the U.S., it's not too far behind that politically or socially.
They ritualize it. The way they'll make that work is they turn it into a ritual. You'll have some kind of religious center called the transference or the transportation center to the other world. And you'll have like a room, like a funeral home, and it'll be all lovely looking. And you can go and kill yourself, and your friends can have like cocktails afterwards in the bar. And there'll be a little movie showing of their lives and stuff. And they'll listen to Mumford & Sons as they're being gassed or whatever it is.
And their carbon tax will be reduced.
Yeah, and that's but something, that's their world. Yeah. That's not the tribe's world. That's not our world. Always remember that when you hear these stories, people tend to start projecting themselves into them. Remember, this is the fucker down the road who's telling you to wear a mask, stay at home, keep social distance. That's the world he's heading towards, not us. And always remember that.
Absolutely.
Just because we're looking at the circus doesn't mean you have to come one of the monkeys.
I was something I was just thinking of too with this suicide pod is, in the introduction of social credit scores. And like you were saying, what if your social credit score is unrecoverable? And so, we're going to pass this on to your kids if you have any, or your next of kin, unless you just go ahead and do this assisted suicide thing. Otherwise, your shitty credit score is going to be passed on to, like how, medical debts and stuff get passed on to family members if someone's passed away. And then, they're saddled with all this debt. So it's another way of like getting people comfortable with the idea, like you said, that life doesn't have any meaning. And if it's shitty enough and these people who are falling into that reality of, everything fucking sucks instead of finding a way out like we have, they're going to be more than willing to.
And they'll kill themselves. They'll kill themselves over things like their favorite Netflix series was canceled.
Yeah, just people are very flippant with stuff like that. With the
I saw a documentary years ago about they put a camera on the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, which is a very popular suicide spot.
Mhm.
And you saw there was literally, honest to God, it was nonstop. But how they behaved when they would throw themselves off the railings, it was like maybe 1 out of 50 would have a moment of contemplation where they stand like this, think for a second, and then climb on the railings and throw themselves in. Some climb up the railings and think like this, and they wouldn't do it. But most of them would just walk up to the railings like they were going to catch a bus and jump over into San Francisco Bay. It was the weirdest thing.
I'm not sure if it's the same documentary you're talking about, but I have seen one about that story. And then in the one that I saw, not very many people survive that. It's very unlikely that you would survive something like that. But sometimes some of these people do survive that. And they say immediately, as soon as they let go and were falling, they regretted it immediately. But there
was one young guy who was actually said that he broke all his arms and legs when he hit the water, but he did survive. And he said he saw dolphins when he came into the surface. He saw dolphins nearby, and he had this desire to live forever. It was the weird stuff, But it's the weirdest thing how these people just kill themselves. Like, shopping list, go to buy eggs, butter, feed the cat, throw myself off the bridge. It was literally like that.
Yeah, it's a to-do list.
Very strange.
And it's like, I would imagine a lot of the people that would use something like this, if they're already all connected up with Neurolink and everything, where's your soul transferring to when you do something like this in a pod like that? Are you linked up to some database that they have, and now you're fucked because your afterlife is a digital one that's been made for you that you fucking subscribe to, and now you're outside of the natural cycle of reincarnating, how we would do it organically. And what is that fucking powering,
Yeah, I was this, and again, the suicide pod thing. It's like, again, like the exorcism earlier on, where's the soul going to go? Who's taking it? Are even evil forces who built that machine with a way of trapping the souls? Here we go, the box, the Cenobites again, Is that the box? Is that the box? Is that the box is that what the real box of the Cenobites is? This Exit International machine,
Like what Timothy was just saying there about where do you go after your bodily death occurs? And Thomas, like you've talked about before, there'll have to be like a digital Moses to bring people into the motherboard land. And it's like, yeah.
The guy on the river Styx, Charon.
Somebody like that. And there'll be some, Greta Thunberg type that's going to be, the digital Moses that will, be taking people over and will make this a Pied Piper. Exactly.
It's probably already happening with the needlecraft.
Yep. And then with the Neuralink chip and everything, there'll be, I would imagine you can depress someone's central nervous system with that chip. And, just like we're talking about with weather manipulation, you can manipulate someone's psychic weather by, bombarding them with a certain amount of electromagnetic radiation just to bring them down, and then, they just, climb into the pod and press, say the consent thing. But
it's not our reality. It's their reality.
And so that thing she said,
don't fret over it. Don't get upset about it. We'll be okay. Always remember that we'll be okay.
Yeah. That AI thing that Timothy just said, I forgot about that there's going to be an AI that scans to see if you're psychologically sound and makes its decision. It's like, how many more things will they do like that? Will their system be where AI determines, if you get food stamps, or if you get, if you can have a kid, or, whatever it is, how many things are going to be AI now? Like, oh, do you need to get, 16 ounces of ground beef? Nope. The AI is determined that you're going, your body fat percentage, you get bugs this week again. this week you get cockroaches. Last week you got the mealworms. But how many things are going to be like that for their world again? But it's like, they're all volunteering for it. And like that. Yeah.
They want it. Off they go. Fuck them. That's their problem, not mine.
Yep. Exactly. And then the rest of us will live in the real world. And
Yeah,
we were talking about something the other day. It was on the metaverse thing. Oh, I think it was because of that story with that guy who's spent $455 million to buy a fucking virtual house. I'm like, you know what? Actually, fuck it. Let them all go into the metaverse and live in their basements and do that shit, and then we can just live outside in the real world. Fucking be gone with them all, and we get to take the Earth back.
And who even knows? Maybe that's the plan.
Yeah.
Maybe
I
that's
like that plan.
Like also with the needlecraft, those of us who are refusing, maybe that's what they're actually looking for us. We are the 200,000 or the 200 million mentioned on the Georgia Guidestones, the ones who are smart enough and not easily led. I mean, did you see that Paul Joseph Watson uploaded a video tonight where the Australian health minister even referred to the people getting the needlecraft as sheep going through the gate?
Yeah, I know. I got a little bit frustrated last week and over the weekend with some things. I had a few clients at work just making weird passive comments like, well, you know, you're really not smart if you don't get the needlecraft, and just I'm holding shears right there, and I'm like, you really don't want to say this shit to me right now. Like, yeah, just fucking please don't. You know, I don't ask anybody their shit when they come in, and sometimes it gets brought up, but just a lot of passive aggressive comments over the past week and over the weekend. And I normally, you know, I still sometimes find myself being afraid of hurting their fucking feelings by telling them to fuck off. And I finally I'd had enough. I was totally fed up over this weekend. So I ranted a little bit, but I felt so much better afterwards. And just, no, dude, there's a fucking boundary there. And don't tell me that I'm not smart.
Yeah, exactly. It's the other way around. I mean, we all have moments in our lives where we encounter something that says, fuck that, I'm not part of the human race. They're not me. That's not me. That's not what. And the one that happened to me was the Manchester One concert. When a guy blew up at Ariana Grande concert in Manchester in England, and a terrorist blew himself up in the lobby and killed a load of little girls mostly. And within seconds before the bodies had been even counted, they had organized a Manchester One concert to heal the city. Now, the girls' bodies hadn't even been brought to the morgue, literally. And literally in a few days, they're all out in a stadium in Manchester singing with Ariana Grande. And it's like, hold on a second. And I remember posting on Facebook, I find this tasteless. I find this disrespectful to the families who've lost their daughters. Well, honest to God, guys, I was savaged. On those comments by people who were saying, what a sick person you are. I was the sicko. For
Isn't
saying,
it unbelievable?
I think this concert is inappropriate. That Ariana Grande is going to be singing about riding the dick bicycle and hand icicles, and while little girls are having their autopsies done. And you think this is a wonderful thing. And they were all like, oh, there was like, no, Liam Gallagher in his orange jacket. You're all talking about it. Wasn't he so cool singing Wonderwall and all this crap? But I was the evil.
Right.
This is, like, I would say something like, I just think this is extremely inappropriate that they're having a concert within days of these kids being killed. For lots of reasons, it's inappropriate. But their attitude was not like, I was the sicko for even suggesting there shouldn't be. And then they show the concert footage, and there's all these drunken shabs and other assholes in the audience with beers singing along with Ariana Grande and smiling and taking selfies. While little
How
girls,
is that not fucking sick and twisted?
They were. That was the moment I said to myself, I'm not part of that anymore. I'm whatever fucking species those motherfuckers are, I'm not one of them. And that the Manchester One conference was such a huge eye-opener for me. And it's not just because it's Manchester or people in England. It goes on, that crap goes on all over the world now. But it was just, that was a glaring one, that they were so mentally unhinged. They were so divorced from being a human that they had more, it was more important that Ariana Grande play her fucking song singing about riding the dick bicycle and hand icicles in front of 14-year-old girls than the 14-year-old girls getting a respectful period of mourning that were actually killed.
And like you said, you know, these are a different species of people almost entirely. And this is how evolution occurs, right? Like,
that's what I felt that day, very much so. I was like, hold on a second. Have I entered into a false reality here, a parallel universe? Maybe I have.
Or maybe this is the beginning of creating a new reality here, where the next phase of human evolution is occurring right now, where consciousness, neurology, physiology, all of it, you know, the interaction between us and our minds and our body is evolving right now. And those of us who are wise enough to be able to be making decisions that are the best for us as individuals, our families, our friends, our groups, and all of that, are the ones that are going to be collectively changing the genetics of humankind as we go forward, so that, you know, we're not in there trying to alter things with software and shit, but we are the ones who are actually, you know, changing the genetic makeup of humankind, so that, you know, going forward, we, you know, we will be the ancestors of the next race of humans, essentially the next iteration of humankind.
And what Timony was saying there, those people who were at the Ariana Grande concert after that, those deaths of those kids, they're the same ones who are putting pictures of their masks on their Twitter feed, going, "Stay home, wear a mask, get the needlecraft." Now, again, was that a test? Was that a test by, what kind of elements are involved here? Was that a test to see how depraved humanity could be made so easily, or for stupid entertainment? And was this, you know, those ones are the same ones that were giving Timony a hard time last weekend, right? Now, if the worst conspiracy regarding the needlecrafts are true, they're all going to be dead. I mean, judging by what's happening to the footballers all collapsing and the basketball players, that this stuff, you know, we're not hearing about the ones at home. I really do believe that it's as much an IQ test as anything else. And I wouldn't be surprised. And even Klaus Schwab, I'm sorry, I don't want to get too political on this, but even Klaus Schwab even said that we don't have properly intelligent people anymore. We just have repeaters. And we have to furnish people, keep people who are unique thinkers and can think for themselves in positions of control in society, who can be creative and think of new things and have independent minds. And it was totally flew in the face of what you first hear about the Great Reset is about. But then I'm starting to think those 200 in perpetual harmony with nature, those 200 million, maybe that's the ones who said, "No, fuck it, I'm not putting that thing in my arm." Yeah. Maybe that's the plan all along.
Well, I think that is a great place to end it. Yeah, it was a really great show today. We covered a lot of topics, and, you know, we always find a really cool organic way of tying in our perspectives, I guess, through some of these stories that, you know, could be real downers and shit. But, you know, it's just having conversations and talking about these things, and they don't have to be scary. I mean, that's not for us. That's not our deal.
That's not how we live. It's information. Nope. Ultimately, how you process at the end is up to you.
Absolutely. All right, you guys, thank you all so much again. What was this, 23? All right, we just wrapped episode 23. I think it's just going to keep on getting better and better. And thank you to everybody in the comment section. You guys are great. So many good comments in the side over there. And, you know, keep thinking for yourselves, and we all have each other's backs. And it really is the greatest time to be alive. Yep,
I agree.
All right, Thomas, will you take care over there in Ireland tonight, and all of you across the globe, wherever you all are? We'll see you in the wild.
Take care, everybody.
Good night.